Joining us now in Studio B, the voice of the Cougars, Greg Wrubell, who will call the rivalry game Saturday night on BYU Radio. Hello, Greg.
Hey, guys. Did Picard also say make it so?
I believe he did. Yes.
That also applies. For
Are you a
right.
Picard or are you a Kirk guy?
I was born in the 60s, man. So I'm a William Shatner guy all the way. Plus, William's Canadian. So.
Oh, yes. Oh, by the way.
I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
Brian said that was
who are you guys talking about?
That was a little Star Trek. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
We were doing Star Wars earlier, now it's Trek.
Yeah.
Brian said earlier that you are his favorite Canadian. He mentioned you along with Drake.
There's a lot of
Justin
competition.
Bieber.
Yeah. Ahead of Drake?
Yeah, ahead of Drake.
Let's just stop right there.
Ahead of Drake, man.
I mean, I've already got my epitaph.
All right, we do want to get to at least one or two football questions first before we get to basketball. So, first question is, how surprised are you that BYU football has not hired an offensive coordinator yet?
Not very, not at all. Just not worried about the time frame right now. A lot of staffs in the country right now are dealing with coaching vacancies. So BYU is just one of those teams right now. Yeah, I'm not sweating it.
That actually makes sense. That really sincerely
calms everybody down. Like, don't worry about it.
That really did.
It'll get done. It'll get done when it gets done.
It's just the season. I mean, there are a lot of teams getting ready for bowl games that have different coaches, assistant coaches, head coaches. It is the season. And I still think February is the more significant signing day. So everyone goes, the signing day's in December. That's still not, I think, the big day. Yeah. And I think a lot of teams have recruits who are waiting to see what the entire staff will look like so they can sign in February. And I think BYU is just one of those teams.
Yep, that makes sense. So Matt Bushman, named to Freshman All-American by USA Today. What do you expect from his career? I mean, this point moving on, his ceiling's pretty high, right? All-American.
Yeah, great things, right? Because he's put himself in some very select company. He's already the freshman tight end record holder, but then you talk about the different other positions, including wide receiver, and he's right there with some of the very best who played at BYU for their first years. And so if you're that good as a rook in a season of some uncertainty, with multiple quarterbacks and schematic issues, if that's what you're able to do right off the mission, I think you say it right, Brian. The ceiling's pretty high for this kid. And again, let's not raise them too high. Yeah. I mean, if he were to do what he did this year for the next 3 years, those would be 4 great tight end seasons, right? Yeah. So he doesn't have to go to 1,000 next season. He's, this is a pretty high level that he's already at. But it clearly speaks to, the body being able to develop more. A full season in the system can't help but benefit him.
Yeah, something that stood out to me there with the multiple quarterbacks reminds me of Cody Hoffman, right? And how he broke the record. Even with different quarterbacks.
So many different guys. I mean, because, Max and John kind of had their group, right? And they're all kind of linked. But you're right, Cody did it with so many different quarterbacks, and similarly to Matt Bushman. Yeah.
Our Twitter question today, Greg, is all about desperation. With BYU hosting the University of Utah at the Marriott Center Saturday night, our question is, describe your level of desperation to have BYU beat Utah. As we know, 7 in a row with football, 3 in a row with basketball, so 10 in a row combined with those two sports. What is your desperation level to have BYU beat Utah?
Well, it has been 5 years since either football or basketball has won a game in the series. Basketball last did it in 2012, so it's been a while. I guess it's moderate. It's not extreme. It'd be really nice. Let's put it that way. It'd be really nice. I'll sleep better Saturday night if BYU wins the game against Utah. But let's not forget, it wasn't too long ago that the Utes were wondering when they were going to beat BYU again in basketball. BYU won 7 in a row before this most recent 3-game jag they're on right now. So it was all BYU for quite a while. It's tipped back to Utah the last few years. Didn't play last year, of course, but the last 3 have gone to the Utes. So, yeah, it's time to flip it back around and get the cyclical thing going the other way on the cycle.
So Jason is really nervous for us as fans to kind of act like that's our Super Bowl or our bowl game. And is trying to steer other BYU fans, don't go down that route. Don't go that way. Do you feel like just the community and us as fans, we are at that point of desperation where we can say you can beat or you can lose any school, any game, doesn't really matter, but beat Utah is all we care about?
I don't know if we've really gotten to that point. I think there's too much left to play for. When it comes to basketball in particular right now, too much left to play for. But what Utah does is does give you that nice resume boost.
Right.
BYU's postseason portfolio right now is needing that shot in the arm that Utah would give you. BYU's got a lot of good things going for it. I mean, the fact they have 3 true away wins already is helpful. The fact they've gotten 8 wins in 10 games just on its face is helpful. The efficiency numbers are both top 100, very helpful. But Utah gives you that again that boost. It's a top 60 Ken Pomeroy team right now, and I think it's what they're kind of needing that they didn't get maybe in Brooklyn with the chance against Alabama. Yeah. Best team they've seen since Bama, so I think best win of the season it would be for BYU, at least just by the numbers.
What has impressed you most about this beginning of the season for the BYU basketball team? Because as you mentioned, a lot of really positive things happening with this team.
The fact that of the 8 wins they've gotten, only 3 have been in the Marriott Center. That's to me most impressive. And the committee always wants to see, what do you do when you get out of your building? How often do you get out of your building? And what do you do when you leave? And BYU has 3 true away victories so far. The WCC, the top of the league, is really excelling away from home right now. So BYU's 8-2, as you see there. Gonzaga's 8-2, St. Mary's 8-2, San Diego 8-2. Those 4 teams have combined to go 10-1 in true away games so far. And again, the committee does like to see how often you challenge yourself outside of your own gym. And BYU's been doing that. People in Utah know how significant it was. People outside of Utah may not. But they went into 2 sold-out buildings in Orem and Logan in the same week and won both those games. I think those who have been around the program and in the state know how significant a week that was for BYU. You hope that the Aggies and Wolverines go on to have really good seasons, because those are really hard-earned wins in a really tough stretch for BYU. Dave will say it began back in Brooklyn with those Bama and UMass games, but then you came back, 2 in-state games, Illinois State, 2 more in-state games. Tough run for BYU, and so far so good as they've gotten off to the 8-2 start.
So you have Utah, coming to the Marriott Center, going to face the same thing, noise and crowd and things like that. And with the whole, rivalry game being gone for a while and safety first thing, I mean, what kind of environment do you expect to have at the Marriott Center?
Just a typical BYU Utah environment, which is just super loud and always intense. And the fact that not a single Utah player has been in that environment, I think is something to watch for, and maybe may impact the outcome. Yeah. None of them have had that experience of 17, 18, 19,000 people roaring loud, and most of them being against you. It's crazy that only 2 Utah players have ever even played BYU before, and only 1 did it in a Ute uniform. That was Parker Van Dyke before his mission. Yeah. So Parker Van Dyke's the 1 Ute who played BYU as a Ute. David Collette's the 2nd guy, and he did it as an Aggie, but up in Logan. Not at BYU, so he's never been in the building. None of the Utes have played a game in the Marriott Center. Then you go to BYU's side. Zach Sellius got 1 game against the U in the Huntsman Center before his mission, and Luke Worthington's had a home game and an away game against Utah. So a combined total of 5 games of experience between all these players on the different rosters, 5 games played in this rivalry, which is very strange. And the fact that you take a year off, you miss a lot when you miss a year, because so many things can happen in that one season, including comings and goings.
Yep. Greg, what do you think the chance is that we can get whoever handles the music inside the Marriott Center to play Safety Dance? You think that's possible? Can we make that happen?
I'm going to slip that in. By the way, Men Without Hats, Canadian band.
Oh, look. And we'll get to the Canadian thing.
Again, I'm so confused.
It's all encompassing.
Men Without Hats, back in the 80s, had a hit song called Safety Dance.
Oh.
And so with safety first and everything else, Jason's thinking it might be a nice playlist selection on Saturday night.
I'm just saying, I think people would appreciate hearing that in the Marriott Center. Yeah. How do you think this BYU team matches up with what Utah brings in on Saturday?
Yeah, I really, the Dalton Nixon injury, I think, hits hard, and a game like Saturday's, I think it shows up too. BYU played only 7 guys against Weber State. The rotation dropped by a guy, and in missing Dalton Nixon. Utah starts 6'10" up front, brings 7 foot off the bench, brings 6'7", 225 in off the bench, and BYU's bench right now doesn't have that. And so, with Dalton, it's a big body. It's a great pick and roll defender. It's an offensive rebounder. He's a good passer. He shows up in a lot of different categories of your team. They don't get a ton of attention, but really at the end help you win a basketball game. He's more than just a glue guy because he shows up in so many different categories that really help you in basketball games. So I think the Dalton and Nixon injury is the one down note for me. Things are really cooking along nicely. You get McKay Cannon in, things are moving along, and then boom, you take a hit. And it's a big hit.
Yeah.
Again, BYU's rotation was only 7 or 8 guys, and now it's down to like 7. They didn't play an 8th against Weber State. And Dalton's body type and just know-how really comes in handy in a game like the Utah game because Utah is big and deep.
Greg, so finish this sentence for me. If BYU wins on Saturday night, they did what?
Led at halftime, which leads us into our stat that matters. BYU in the Dave Rose era. By the way, is it okay to go there right now?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. We didn't even plan this, man. That was perfect.
Okay. Yeah, right up. We're all on the same wavelength here. So BYU in the Dave Rose era has won 90% of its games, 89.8% to be precise, when they lead at halftime. They are undefeated in their games this year when leading at halftime. They've led in the last 4 or 5 at the break. It means a lot. Well, you go, oh, maybe everyone wins 90% of their games when they lead at halftime. Not so. Not so fast, my friend. BYU's opponents, when they lead BYU at halftime, their win rate is almost 30% lower, 62.4%. So it doesn't happen for everybody, but it happens for BYU. When they lead at the break, there's a really good chance they're going to win the game. A 90% chance, 89.8, they're going to win the game. So just playing the first 20 solid means a lot for BYU. We saw it last week against Illinois State, for example. How well they played in the first half helped them win that basketball game, even despite the fact that Illinois State scored 51 after halftime. BYU had the cushion they needed. When they play well in the first 20, there's a real good shot they're going to win the game. So I'll look at that as one of the factors in the Utah game. Not the only one, but it's one that kind of led us into our stats.
Wasn't Kalani's record at halftime significantly high as well?
BYU's win rate, football and basketball, when leading at the break is really, really high and higher than normal. It's much better than the opponents have when leading BYU at the break. Yeah.
All right. We've mentioned Canada several times on this program.
It
we
happens.
have Brian Logan's favorite Canadian on set, which brings us to Greg, a cool thing about Canada.
All right, did you know Canada has not 1 but 2 national sports? Now, the one we think is going to be, that's a given, right? It's hockey.
Right, yes.
So what would you guess the second national sport of Canada might be?
Curling.
So you'd say curling.
Yes.
Right? But you're wrong.
Ooh.
I'd say curling too. But no. And this is actually this is a federal act.
There's a law about this.
There's a law about this. Her Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the Senate and House of Commons of Canada, enacts as follows: the National Sports of Canada Act, whereby the game commonly known as ice hockey is hereby recognized and declared to be the national winter sport of Canada, and the game commonly known as lacrosse is hereby recognized and declared to be the national summer sport of Canada. And lacrosse had its origins in the Canadian hinterlands back in the day.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not.
It was a
cool thing about Canada. I did not know that.
Tribal game played in the Great Lakes region in St. Lawrence Valley, and it became to be quite well known in the olden days of Canada, and so we get to claim it as one of our 2 national sports.
That's legit.
That is a burgeoning sport, by the way. That is becoming more and more popular to play.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I've never. If you guys ever play? I've never played it.
I played in PE. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
You had it in PE?
Yeah.
We had curling in PE up in Canada.
Did you really?
Oh, yeah.
Everything in
Oh, yeah.
PE. What school did you go to?
All we did in our PE in like elementary school is we did the tarp up in the air and then pulled it down and sat on it.
Oh, dude, I feel
Apparently I
so
got-
bad
Did
for
you do any rope climbing?
I did do rope
Yeah,
climbing. Yeah, I
okay.
was pretty good at that.
Okay,
And the
you got
pull-ups.
that.
Greg, thank you so much for joining
Hey,
us. Appreciate it, as always.